Welcome to the Career Rockstars podcast.
Hello, listeners. I'm your host, Dr. Alicia Ali. Welcome to this episode of the Career Rockstars podcast. My guest today is Andrew Parker, founder of Wasabi Consulting. He's a certified coach focused on leadership and business. He's also the founder of Anxious Executive Initiative. I can't wait to hear about that. And also a university lecturer, and he's a management consultant, and he's also a fellow podcast host. Andrew holds an MBA and is a certified cultural intelligence facilitator. Wow, wow, wow. He has more than 25 years experience in the sales and marketing domain, a true corporate survivor. He has lived and worked on 4 continents, Australia, US, Europe, and Asia, and is currently based in Singapore. And he also spent 3 years in Brussels, Belgium, where I'm living right now. It seems to me that Andrew is on a career adventure. Join me in welcoming Andrew Parker to the Career Rockstars podcast. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Alicia, and thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, so Andrew, you and we met via exchanges, I believe, on LinkedIn.
We did.
And isn't it amazing how the virtual world brings people together? I mean, I immediately knew once I met you that I had to interview you to share your career story, to demonstrate to our listeners here today how we can really steer our careers, whether proactively or reactively. And what a career path you've had. So, Andrew, why don't you start by telling us a bit about what you do currently?
Thanks, Alicia. And it was really interesting listening to your introduction because I guess to use an Australian expression, I'm potentially a jack of all trades and maybe a master of none, but maybe I'm a master of some. Currently, as you said, I founded a management consulting company here in Singapore called Wasabi Consulting. After a long corporate career, which I guess we'll talk about a little bit later. So I'm primarily a management consultant and trainer. I'm also a leadership and executive coach. And then sometimes when you start your own business, your business goes in different directions. So I'm also yes. an adjunct lecturer at one of the universities here in Singapore as well. And I started a little business or a little initiative called the Anxious Executive, working with introverts in business, which is more of a passion project. So that's a little bit about what I do today.
Okay, so that's you're all like we used to call it the octopus in corporate.
Yes, very
you're
much
able
so.
to do so many things. Great. So I've sort of highlighted all the different roles you've been doing or have done. Would you like to share with us, I mean, for our listeners to better understand some of the key high moments and maybe low moments of your career to date?
Mm-hmm. And there's certainly been both, Alicia, and I think it's important to talk about both as well. And I find, and I guess you're the same too, when you're working with coaching clients, sometimes people want to hear both the good and the bad, but they want to hear the scars. And see the scars that you have. So I guess I describe myself as a corporate survivor. So I spent 25 years or so working in the corporate world, starting my career in Australia. And as you can probably hear from my accent, I'm Australian, and left Australia about 14 or 15 years ago on what was meant to be a 2-year expat placement to Brussels, ironically. I've been back to Australia, but I've not been back to Australia to live since then. So most of my career has always been spent in the sales, marketing, and strategy side of companies, particularly in manufacturing and B2B companies. And I'd always wanted to start my own business, and I had that opportunity a few years ago to do that. I found that I just wanted to step back from the corporate world a little bit. I found the constant travel quite draining, and I felt it was the right time in my life to test myself and test my skills with my own business. Little did I know what the world would have in store for all of us. So it's been a challenging time in the last few years to keep my business both up and running and then surviving and thriving. But it's been a really good experience. So I've had roles where I've failed in front of customers, where I've failed in front of senior executives, but I've had roles also where that's given me the opportunity to be successful. And I've always been very grateful for the opportunities that the corporate world has given me to continue to develop myself and continue to say yes to new opportunities. And I've found through my career, I'm the sort of person that I get bored might be the wrong word, but I get bored after maybe 18 months or 2 years in the one role. And I'm not the sort of person who can go to work and do the same thing day in, day out for the rest of their lives. And so I was always seeking new challenges, and that was fantastic. Well, it's been fantastic that I've had those opportunities that I've worked for and been given by the different companies that I've worked with and for. And so that's really led me to work in lots of different countries and live in lots of different countries as well.
Wow.
And those experiences have been fantastic.
Yeah. So bored, as you said, is just another way of saying I'm bored of my comfort zone. I'm ready to take something new on, take on a new challenge, right?
It's
So
interesting to say that, because that's exactly what it's like the first 6 or 12 months, or maybe the first 3 to 6 months. You think, oh my goodness, what have I done here? I'm really struggling. And then you start to move into sort of that 6 to 12 month phase, and you feel comfortable. And then you start to make a difference. And then at about the 12 to 18 month mark, you think, oh, what's next? And I've been lucky that I've been given those opportunities.
Yeah, and sometimes when people move around too often, people tend to call them, I remember we had this terminology, butterfly, career butterfly. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, because people then perform better when they move on to more challenging roles. Because if you were to stay in the same role for 3 to 5 years and you've already reached your max, then it's not serving anyone, right?
No, it's not. It's not. And I found that I had to work through those moments of feeling like an imposter as well. So every time I was stretched, particularly as I was facing and working with more and more senior people, both inside the company, but also externally with customers as well, is that the imposter started to raise its ugly head. And you think, wow, what am I doing here? Am I really capable of this? Will I be found out? And so that's been something that I've had to work with and work through. And I'm sure lots of other people, in fact, I know lots of other people have to work through that as well.
Yeah, and it's not gender specific. I mean, a lot of women, I can only speak from a woman's point of view. It's highly rampant amongst women, especially in mid to senior management. We suddenly fall into that imposter syndrome complex, and it affects different people different ways. So I'm glad that you brought it up, because indeed you have now this anxious executive initiative. Tell me how that ties in with the imposter syndrome and what you're seeing today when you work with your clients.
It's certainly very much connected, Alicia, and I guess my personal experience is that despite working in sales and marketing and lots of customer-facing roles and strategy roles, I was always at least taught in my professional life that to be an introvert was wrong, effectively, and that I was in the wrong type of work. And people don't necessarily associate introverts as being somebody who can work in commercial roles and customer-facing roles. Sorry, Alicia.
We have a visitor. That's
we
okay.
do have a visitor. I'm happy to be vulnerable and share what's happening. So one of the hazards of working from home at the moment is that there's lots of background noise. So I do have a dog who's just appeared. So I apologize.
We love dogs.
So I was always taught that being an introvert was not only wrong from a professional point of view, but you could not be a successful sales and marketing and commercial person if you were introverted. And it took me a long time to both talk publicly and to acknowledge what I needed to be successful for myself and to manage myself and my introversion, and particularly my introverted energy levels. And it was only in the last 5 or 6 years that I come to realize that that was a really important aspect of my journey, was to talk about it, but to be proud of my introverted self and to look after myself from a physical and mental point of view during my career as well. And so part of the initiative that I started, The Anxious Executive, was to work with fellow introverts in business to help them embrace their introversion and understand what I refer to as the introverted superpowers.
Tell me more about that.
Introverts have a unique set of skills, and we don't typically realize what those skills are, sometimes until too late. So to give you an example, so in my career in sales and marketing, most people would think that an introvert cannot be successful in sales and marketing. But if you think about it in terms of the skill set or the unique skill set that introverts have, they're typically detail-oriented. They're typically very good at developing deeper relationships one-on-one. They're typically likely to stick at tasks right to the very end. And
it's okay. You'll be on the podcast too.
His name's Elwood, if anyone is interested in finding out more about Elwood. And so there's some of the skill sets that I see introverts having that they don't realize that they have, and that lend themselves naturally to sales and marketing and commercial roles. And the other thing too that people think that introverts cannot do is that they cannot extend themselves into the extroverted zone. And that's certainly not the case. That's not my experience. You just have to stretch yourself into that extroverted zone, but it's about how you look after yourself. It's about how you look after yourself both before and after stretching yourself into that extroverted zone. Mm-hmm. Alicia, I'm really sorry. I'm just going to put you on mute. I'm actually going to step away for 30 seconds.
I'm going to pause the recording. Okay.
So introverts have a unique set of skills. And if I think about that in terms of my own career in sales and marketing, where you typically think that introverts may not be successful in that field of work, introverts are able to develop really deep one-on-one relationships with people. They're typically detail-oriented and detail-focused. They're able to stick at tasks right until the very end. And there's some of the skills that introverts forget that they actually have. And so the Anxious Executive Initiative was is a passion project that I started to really help introverts embrace and understand their introversion and understand what it takes to look after themselves and understand what it takes to stretch themselves into the extroversion zone, which we have to do in order to continue to operate in the world and be successful. But we also need to be able to look after ourselves as well. And so really that's what I do with particularly on the coaching side with my clients who are introverted and looking to understand and really embrace their true selves.
Interesting, because I'm thinking in terms of the link between introverted personality and the imposter syndrome that you spoke about. Is there any correlation there?
Yes, very much so. Yes. In fact, I like to use the expression that real imposters don't have imposter syndrome. And I think imposter syndrome exists for lots of people, whether you're introverted or extroverted. But I think sometimes all of the, at least in my experience, all of the peripheral activities around my career, so the dinners, some of the presentations, some of the meetings, etc. It sometimes felt, because I was running out of energy, that I couldn't actually do this. No, I didn't feel as though I could actually do it. And that's when the imposter raised its ugly head. Mm-hmm. What I didn't realize at the time was that was just introversion, and I needed to look after myself in a much better way. So for example, if I was arriving into a country, going to work, jet lagged out of my mind, up at 2 a.m., having to do a full day, the last thing I felt like doing was actually having and going to a team dinner. For me, that felt like that, well, why can't I do this? Other people do this. And am I really a fraud? And so you start to ask yourself those sort of questions. But all it is a matter of actually just looking after yourself and looking after your introverted self and your energy levels in a different way. And so for me, the two blended
Interesting.
very closely.
Interesting. We spoke earlier about the plane behind you and
Yes.
how much we used to travel all over the world. And I'm more extroverted. I wouldn't say I'm extreme extroverted, but I'm more extroverted. And indeed, I would go through those long flights, and I used to actually look forward to the dinners, because that's where I got recharged with the energy of the people around me. But at the same time, as I became more mature, I understood that some people needed that time. I didn't think in terms of introversion per se, but I understand that some people needed that personal time, so not everyone would show up. But now that we're speaking, and also later on, I figured out, yeah, it's because of their personality traits. And we all do the MBTI profile, right? At some point in our career, and many people take it for granted, the 4 letters or whatever, and we don't realize how much those traits can impact not only ourselves, but our impact on other people. So to all the listeners, if you're doing an MBTI, think about it's your personality, you're unique, and how you can optimize the use of your personality regardless of where you are and what you're doing in your career.
I think that's really good advice, Alicia. And the other advice I'd have, and I learned this through a bitter experience, is that if you're a manager or a leader and you're asking your team to share their MBTIs, please be careful in the way that you actually do that, and create a safe space to actually do that and explore that. In my particular situation, this is now quite some time ago and very early in my career, we were asked in a group of 40 or 45 people to declare what our MBTI was. And there were only 3 out of 40 or 45 people who were actually introverts in the room. It was a very male-dominated sales environment in Australia. And we were actually made to feel very embarrassed as to our introverted tendencies and our MBTI classification. So creating that safe space for your team to share and be willing to share is something else I'd certainly add on to what you just suggested.
Yeah. Yeah, I must say I was somewhat guilty of that as an extrovert myself. But no, as we grow and we become more mature in our careers, and really for our listeners out there, those who might be, just starting to advance into senior manager status or something like that, be aware of what's happening, not only within you, but around you. And look carefully and observe and learn from what's happening. And, we tend to be one-tracked. We can look around and see what's happening. So on top of that, I would like to switch gears a bit. Thanks for sharing all of that juicy stuff on imposter syndrome and so on. In today's world, we are no longer taking the planes. But we have this freedom of virtual movement. And I know that you're also a cultural intelligence facilitator. And I guess that's not only the certificate, because you also lived on 4 continents. So how would you position the role of cultural intelligence in terms of career management or advancement?
I think it's really important, Alicia, and it's funny, as we were talking about my career earlier and being in Brussels, I was reminded of a very important person in that part of my career, who effectively worked as my cultural translator for both the time I was in Brussels, but we were working on a global project for several years together, traveling around the world together. And I've always been really interested in other cultures and working across different cultures and understanding a bit more about those cultures. So I think we're all increasingly, if not always, being asked to work across both cultural boundaries and national boundaries as well. So I think it's really important for us to be able to explore other people's cultures in the right way, and try and understand other people's and other cultures' perspectives, whether you're working in the East or the West or somewhere in between. And I think I've found it really helpful to have conversations with people about what their why is, Why is something happening? Why does this work this way? Rather than make a judgment, it's important to try and step into somebody else's shoes and understand the why, perhaps before you make a judgment. And that's been something that served me quite well throughout my career.
So we move from the classical judgment to curiosity, and then to appreciation of what's really happening around us. So you see the same impacts of cultural intelligence, whether virtual or in person?
I think it's a lot harder virtually. So I know from experience, it's a lot easier face-to-face because you can take a lot more cues from body language or from the environment that's around you. It's a lot harder, I think, over Zoom or virtually. So I find, at least when I'm on Zoom, I have to take it a little bit slower to try and understand the cues or observe some more cues. And sometimes it's just best, I find, just to sit and to wait and maybe ask a question and give people a lot more space than maybe you ordinarily would if you were in person, because you don't have those or that space and those cues, at least, to be able to pick up on some cultural differences. It's also one of the things I really, really miss about not traveling is the opportunity to have those informal, sometimes quite intimate conversations with people about why they have this particular view or understand the particular context, or to have that coffee or that dinner meeting, for example, and really understand what's actually happening behind the scenes or what the background is. And so there's some of the things that I really miss about working face-to-face that you cannot do virtually. It's hard to have that conversation in the back of a car with someone and say, look, you seem a little bit quiet, or this conversation seemed to be quite upsetting to you. Tell me a bit more about what you're thinking. You don't get that, and it's hard to have that virtually. So that's what I do miss. And so sometimes you have to create that opportunity.
And the food, not to mention the food. The food is part of the cultural intelligence and appreciation of the way people would shake your hand, the simple things, the way people smile, the way the taxi driver would treat you. It all has an impact on your experience as an expat, or even on a business trip, as we used to have a lot of those.
Absolutely. And I love learning about other people's cultures, but particularly their politics and their religion. But you have to approach those things very, very carefully. And there's the dog again saying hello. You have to approach those things very, very carefully. And it's harder to do that sometimes virtually. You can do that a lot easier face-to-face. But I think you used the word curiosity before, Alicia, and I think that's really important. No matter what culture you're working in, bring lots of curiosity and bring lots of respect to the conversation. And that will serve you really well.
Great. Thanks for wrapping that up nicely. So if I were to bring you back, the purpose of this podcast, as we highlighted, is really to help professionals to take back control of their careers and to somewhat always be ready for their next career move. How would you summarize your own approach to your career management? I mean, whether in corporate or having your own business, how would you summarize your approach to career management and growth?
That's an interesting question, because it's been a little bit haphazard. And it's funny, Alicia, because one of the things that I do when I'm working with my university students, or the university students, is that we run a management forum at the end of every semester, and I bring in people from different industries to come and talk about their career journeys. And one of the things that I always work with the students on is one of the philosophies that served me really well in my career and managing my career is to say yes. Just say yes to whatever opportunity you're given. And I never set out to have the career that I did, but I've had fun along the way. And I know that at the end, I've at least said yes to lots of really interesting things that have happened to me during my career. So it doesn't have to be large yeses, so to speak. You don't have to say yes to that international move or to that role, but maybe say yes to a lateral move. Maybe say yes to accepting a short-term assignment. Say yes to presenting to the board of directors for the very first time. Say yes to, if you're at a conference, reporting back from the group activity or the breakout activity, for example. Say yes to lots of those opportunities, because that takes you to different places. And that's really been one of the guiding principles from my career that I found really helpful and really quite rewarding, because that opens up lots of new opportunities. And that's exciting.
As we say yes and then figure it out.
Correct, exactly.
As long as you don't say too many yeses at the same time, because then you become overwhelmed. And
you still have to be able to say no as well.
No to the right things and yes to the things that are really aligned with your mission, with your journey, and where you want to be, and being career aware, as I call it.
Indeed, and sometimes you have to say yes to things that scare you a little bit in order to progress and continue to develop, and that's been helpful for me.
Yeah, that's where coaches come in, right? We help our clients to really dare more, also dare a bit more to take on new responsibilities. It's part of the intertwine between career and leadership coaching. Good. So what advice would you give to marketing and sales professionals? I want to say just starting off, but maybe 5 or a bit more years into the game.
Wow. There's lots of opportunities in sales and marketing, and some people think about sales and marketing as either being a sales person or a sales representative or a sales manager and or a marketing person. There's hundreds and hundreds of roles within sales and marketing. So explore what's right for you. I'm not a classical salesperson, and at one end of the spectrum, I cannot cold call. I can, but I just don't like it at all. But at the other end of the sales and marketing spectrum, there's more strategy or strategic type roles. And that's what I really loved about sales and marketing. So figure out what commercial role is right for you, and say yes, as we were talking about before, to some of those lateral moves. You might find that you're really interested in marketing. You might find you're really interested in managing sales teams or customer-facing roles. I did a lot of work in my career on commercial excellence or sales and marketing excellence programs, which were transformation programs, and they were fantastic. And I got to see another side of sales and marketing that I hadn't ordinarily seen before, hadn't heard of before. So there's lots and lots of different roles. So I'd encourage people to explore different sales and marketing roles as part of their career journey. If you're about 5 years in, one of the things that's quite helpful as well, there's lots of companies out there as well that have experienced commercial leadership or experienced commercial or sales and marketing development programs, where they're looking for people who are sort of 5 to 8 years into their career, who will be taken on an accelerated career development path. And they're really helpful to look out for as well. There's lots of big global companies that have those as well.
Okay. So that's interesting because, as we talked earlier, there are proactive measures you can take, and then there are reactive measures. So proactively learn to know what's going on within your organization and what opportunities are there for you. Sometimes there's so many things on the plate for employee engagement and professional growth, and many employees are not aware of it. So it's one of the things I encourage clients to do. Really have a look around, investigate, and see what's there to support you for your professional development. And maybe you get some personal development in there also.
I think that's great advice. The other thing I'd suggest to Alicia that I've seen work really well is that if you're interested in a role, but that role does not exist, go out and create that role for yourself. So write the position description and have the conversations inside an organization. That's where you want to develop your career, whether it be in sales and marketing or not. But some of the most successful people I've seen actually create their own roles and they promote that internally. And that's a great way to be able to continue to develop yourself as well. So
I did that all the time.
Okay, perfect. A great example.
Yeah, the trick here is to say yes to yourself. Remember, we had this earlier bit on saying yes. It's about saying yes to yourself. And if you are aligned and completely confident with and you can do this, of course, it wouldn't be perfect the first time you present it, but daring again to take things as far as, company culture might have an impact on that. But as far as you believe you can go, why not come up with your own job description? Yep. And it still happens today.
Yes, it does. And
yes.
I've seen very successful people do that themselves.
So we're coming closer to the end. And I just wanted to thank you as we go along for everything you've been sharing. But what resources would you have, or maybe books, courses that you could offer to support our listeners who might want to invest in their personal and professional development?
So a few different suggestions. And I'm not suggesting everybody does this, but I actually went back to university at about I think it was a 6 or 7 year mark in my career and studied my MBA part-time, which really changed the course of my career, because I had a liberal arts background prior to that. And so that's one thing to do, is think about whether you need or would like to undertake further education. Continue to be curious about the world around you. So there's lots of micro courses and micro learning courses, etc. And I work, and as I'm sure you do too, Alicia, with your clients. I coach clients who are at different stages of their career. So it's sometimes really helpful to actually invest in somebody who's only focused on you. That could be a coach, for example, or perhaps find a mentor inside the organization. They're really great resources as well. And then if you're interested in, or you're a fellow introvert, there's lots of groups supporting introverts. I've just been a contributing editor on a book, for example, on reluctant networking. So there's lots of different resources out there, particularly online, that you can tap into to help yourself embrace your introversion.
Okay. Would you tell us a bit more about the book? Is this available? Can we?
Yeah, indeed. That's the that's the book. I was about 16 or 17 different contributing editors. So I contributed a chapter on my story about my introversion in business. And if people are interested in finding out more about the book, they can connect with me through, I guess, the show notes for the podcast. Check my website out, which is wasabi-consulting.com, and you can connect with me through there. So I can certainly arrange for the book.
Great, it would certainly be in the notes, and we'll also be posting this on YouTube, so they can find it there also.
Great, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing your strategies, your systems, your stories on how you managed your career, ranging from sales and marketing to current lecturer and, a professional coach and consultant. And I really like your initiative around anxious executive. I think I could have used that a few years ago.
It's good fun. Way of doing that. Both Elwood the dog and I thank you for the opportunity to be on your podcast.
Yeah, we're not quite done yet. There's one more theme question, which is linked to the Rockstar. I always save this one for last. So what makes you a career rockstar?
It's really funny you say that, Alicia, because if somebody asked me what my dream job was, there's a few, but one of them would be to be a rock star, which sounds really unusual, I think, for an introvert. I just think there'd be nothing better than standing up in front of tens of thousands of people and being in particularly a rock and roll band. So I'd love to be a rock star, but that's not possible. I can't sing, I can't dance, and I have no musical ability whatsoever. So what makes me a career rock star? I think there's a few things that make me a career rock star. One is that we've spoken about, I said yes to lots of new opportunities. And I'm really proud of the fact that I've had the opportunity to live and work in different countries. And the other thing that stands out to me is that despite being an introvert, I've been able to be successful in my career and take on lots of new opportunities, and to have developed a career in sales and marketing, which I'm really proud of, and that I've been able to push myself, sometimes too far, but be able to push myself to be successful and to work across different cultures and different companies. And I'm really proud of that.
Super. In my eyes, you are a career rock star.
Thank you.
So, my dear listeners, no doubt Andrew has inspired us and you with his international career path and some bold moves that he has made by saying yes along the way. No matter what our personal traits, they're all strengths, and we can learn to use them to our benefits and to support others, like Andrew has with his trait around introversion. And altogether, the importance of personal and professional development in career management. And he also provided some reading resources. So I must thank Andrew Parker again for sharing his career journey with us. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks.
Remember, you're welcome. Remember, you're unique, your career is unique, and your lifestyle is unique, and that it's never too late or early to take control of your career, to become your own career rock star. This is your host, Dr. Alicia Ali, Europe's premier career coach and mentor. Thank you for listening, and remember to subscribe. Join us the next time on the Career Rockstars podcast.
We'll enable you to be more, lead more, and to live more, to become a career rock star.